All right, everybody, welcome in. Time for another deep dive. And folks, this time we are diving into, well, the Evil series finale. You know that show? It's horror, it's funny, social commentary, sometimes all at once.
It really is a unique
I
blend
guess.
of genres, and they do it so well.
They really do. And this finale, I have to say, did not disappoint yet.
No, it did not. Going into it, we knew that Evil was not a show that shied away from taking risks.
Right.
But this finale, I think, really dove into some really interesting territory.
Right.
Particularly with the way that it used technology as a vehicle for exploring human vulnerability.
Yeah, and right off the bat, the episode opens with this whole build-up to this meeting of 60 demonic families.
Right.
So you're thinking
Yeah.
Major League
Voodoo.
Evil convention, right? Like, what is about to, like, you're just bracing yourself for something epic.
I know.
And then classic Evil
Yes.
just kind of pulls the rug out from under you a little bit.
Yes, that is their MO for sure. And instead of this massive gathering of demonic forces, we get Leland and Mr. Stick orchestrating this very cleverly staged distraction,
Right.
this fake black mass that ends up taking out the entire Vatican security force.
With, may I add, poisoned cauldrons and a very strangely placed rendition of Tomorrow from Annie.
Of course, yeah. Which on the surface is darkly funny, and Evil always excels at that kind of blend of humor and horror. But it also reveals, I think, a deeper commentary about the dangers of blind faith and the ways in which institutions can be manipulated.
Absolutely. And it's not just a demonic prank. It really makes you think about how easily authority, even one that's rooted in faith, can be misled and the disastrous consequences that can follow from that.
Absolutely.
And this whole theme of manipulation through technology, it only intensifies with the reemergence of those VR goggles. Remember those?
Oh, yes.
Cheryl gifts those to her granddaughters back in season 1.
Right,
Yeah.
right. And those VR goggles become really the centerpiece of the demonic plan in this finale.
Right.
But not in the way that you might expect.
Right.
This time they're linked to a new horror VR game called Mother Midnight, which subjects each character to their own personalized nightmare.
And these aren't just jump scares. These
No.
nightmares are like deeply personal, tapping into each character's specific fears and anxieties.
Exactly. And then, to make matters even worse, you have this ominous 24-hour countdown. It's ticking away within this game. So it really raises the stakes, and it forces these characters and us as viewers to confront this unsettling question. What happens when the timer runs out? Does this virtual nightmare bleed into reality?
Yeah, it's brilliant because you have this, kind of outlandish concept, right? Demon-fueled VR game.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you can't help but see these unsettling parallels to our own lives.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, think about how much time we all spend on our devices, how easy it is to just get caught up in these curated realities presented to us online.
And that's where I think the show's commentary on technology becomes really insightful. Because it's not so much about the technology itself, but it's about how it can be used to exploit our vulnerabilities, to amplify our fears, and to manipulate our perceptions of reality. And you think about Leland and Mr. Stick's plan with the VR game, it hinges on this idea of exploiting pre-existing fears, pre-existing anxieties. And it's not that different from how, say, algorithms target our online behavior, our preferences.
And just when you thought the show couldn't get any more meta, we have to address the big reveal. The 60 demonic families meeting, drumroll please.
On a Zoom call.
A Zoom call.
Zoom call. It's such a perfectly evil moment, right? This juxtaposition of ancient evil with the mundane reality of a video conference call. And yet, it's that very juxtaposition that I think makes the episode's commentary so effective. Because it forces us to confront this uncomfortable truth about how easily something like a video call can be used for manipulation and control.
Well, right, because you laugh, right.
Yeah.
You laugh at these demons. You're like, oh, they're struggling with the mute button.
Yes.
But at the same time, are we really that different?
Exactly. I mean, you have this ancient evil that has figured out how to harness the power of the internet to exploit this very technology that we rely on for connection and communication. It's comical, but it's also unsettling at the same time.
It really is. And this is where Ben's discovery about the VR goggles becomes even more unsettling.
Oh, tell me.
Because he figures out that they have a brain interface built into them.
Right.
So it's not just about what you see and hear in the virtual world. It's a direct line to your brain waves.
Wow.
To your deepest fears and emotions.
It's interesting, and that actually ties into, I think, one of the most chilling revelations in this entire finale.
Right.
And it's this connection between the demonic sigil map, the one with those intricate symbols representing the 60 demonic houses.
Right, yeah.
and a map of the human brain.
Wait, what?
Yes.
Okay, now you're going to have to back that up a little bit for me because I will fully admit that went right over my head.
Okay, so remember how this sigil map has been this recurring symbol
Right.
throughout the entire series,
Right.
representing this intricate hierarchy of demonic forces.
Okay.
Well, in the finale, David makes this connection, and he realizes that these symbols on this sigil map, they align perfectly with the map of the human brain,
Okay.
specifically the thalamus.
And the thalamus, for those of us who haven't, brushed up on our neuroanatomy lately,
Sure.
what does that do again?
So the thalamus is basically the control center of your brain for sensory information and emotional responses.
Okay.
It's the part of your brain that processes fear, pleasure, pain, all those primal instincts.
Okay.
So when you look at this sigil map lined up against the brain map, it becomes very clear that this isn't just some random collection of symbols. This is a literal road map for how these demonic forces can manipulate our deepest fears, our desires.
Which makes that whole Zoom call with the 60 families even more terrifying because
Yeah.
now they figured out how to, cut out the middleman.
It's exactly.
They don't need to tempt us with earthly delights or sow discord amongst us. They
Right.
can just go straight to the source and just manipulate our brain chemistry.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And as one of the characters so chillingly puts it, why go to the trouble of tempting when you could just upload despair directly into the brain?
Oh, wow.
Right.
That's terrifying.
And it's a line that I think really drives home this episode's message about the potential dangers of technology. Technology, it's not just a tool for communication. It's not just a tool for entertainment. It can be a weapon that can be wielded to control and manipulate our very thoughts and emotions.
It's funny you mentioned that whole thing about, uploading despair directly into the brain.
Right.
Because you really start to think about, how much of our lives are already mediated through technology.
That's
right. I mean, we are constantly just bombarded with information, targeted ads, these carefully curated versions of reality. It's like, how much of what we think and feel is actually our own anymore?
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? And it's a question that I think feels especially relevant today in a world where the line between our online and offline lives is increasingly blurred.
Absolutely. And in the midst of all of this talk about technology and demonic brain interfaces and all this,
Right.
we still have Leland running around trying to tie up some loose ends.
Right.
And his primary target, as always, is Kristen.
Of course, yeah. I mean, their dynamic throughout the entire series has been this psychological tug of war,
Right.
with Leland constantly trying to undermine Kristen's sense of self or morality.
Yes.
And the finale really brings that dynamic to a head.
It does.
Leland, ever the showman, even in his desperation,
Right.
poses as this new client
Right.
and shows up at Kristen's office, hoping to get a rise out of her. And initially, it seems like he might actually succeed, because Kristen is, understandably, still dealing with the trauma of everything that she's been through.
Oh, yeah, but Kristen's not playing around this time. She ends up tasing Leland repeatedly. And I have to say, as a viewer, it's a pretty cathartic moment.
Oh, absolutely. It's a very powerful moment, and I think it speaks to Kristen's resilience, her refusal to be victimized any longer.
Right.
But this being evil, Leland doesn't go down without a fight.
Right. Of course not.
He sneaks into the Bouchard home through that creepy demon hole, no less, and tries to attack Kristen in her sleep.
And this is where the tension really ratchets up, because Kristen's there. She thinks she's alone. She's fearing for her safety. She prepares to defend herself. And there's even that moment where it seems like she might actually kill Leland.
Right.
But just as she's about to cross that line, David and Ben intervene.
Oh, thank goodness.
And I think that intervention, that moment of connection, that moment of support is so crucial because it highlights the power of their friendship, of their bond, as this counterpoint to the isolation and the division that Leland and these demonic forces represent.
Absolutely. It's like, even when they're faced with pure evil, they have each other's backs.
Right.
And that solidarity, that refusal to let the darkness win, it's ultimately what gives them the strength to overcome these challenges.
Yes, and it really speaks to that message that even in the darkest of times, human connection, compassion can be such a powerful force for good.
Oh, I love that.
So what happens to Leland? Because I have to know. For a character who caused so much chaos, his ending felt very, understated.
You're right. It wasn't this big, explosive confrontation that you might have been expecting.
Yeah.
Leland's plan,
Yeah.
in the end, is almost pathetically simple. It's desperate, even.
Yeah.
And ultimately, they trap him in the demon cabinet.
The demon cabinet. Oh my gosh, I forgot about that thing.
Yep.
Okay, for those who may need a refresher, what is the demon cabinet?
It's that antique cabinet that acts as a prison for demonic entities.
Right, right.
And there's this delicious irony to it. You have Leland, who's craved power and control above all else,
Right.
ending up trapped, powerless, at the mercy of something even more powerful than himself. It's a fitting end for a character who really thrived on chaos and manipulation.
It really is. Okay, so we've talked about the finale's big thematic takeaways, what happens to Leland, but what about everybody else? What about the other characters? Because one thing that really struck me about this ending was how open-ended it felt. Like it wrapped up certain storylines, but others were left very deliberately unresolved.
And I think that that ambiguity is intentional.
Okay.
This series finale, much like life itself, doesn't really offer any easy answers, any neat resolutions. Instead, you're kind of left with this lingering sense that the battle against evil is never really over. It's constantly evolving.
And you see that, I think, most clearly with David, right?
Yeah.
Because he leverages his newfound position within the Vatican to restart that assessor program.
Right.
So it's like he's finally embracing this role, even if it means working within a flawed system.
Yeah, and I think that's a really interesting choice, especially given his internal struggles with faith throughout the series.
Right. I think it suggests a kind of pragmatism on his part, like this recognition that sometimes you have to work within existing structures, however imperfect they may be, to fight for a greater good. He's choosing to be an agent of change from within.
Yeah, I like that. And then there's Ben, who decides to step away from the assessor program altogether.
Right, because he found financial stability.
Right, which, part of me was like, really? That's how Ben gets out of this, because he's always been the skeptic, the one who's questioning everything.
Right, and you kind of wonder if his cynicism was always a defense mechanism in a way.
Right.
A way to distance himself from the darkness that he'd witnessed.
Or maybe he's just reached a breaking point and he needs to prioritize his own well-being.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, for Ben, confronting evil so directly just wasn't sustainable in the long run.
Yeah, I could see that. And then there's Kristen, who, in a surprising turn of events, decides to join David in Rome.
I know.
So they're going to continue this work with the assessors.
Right in the heart of the Vatican.
Which is a very bold move, I have to say.
It is, considering how she felt about organized religion initially and all of the trauma that she's endured because of her connection to the assessor program.
Right.
I think it really speaks to her strength, her unwavering determination to fight for what she believes in, even if it means completely upending her life and venturing into this unfamiliar territory.
It does make you wonder, though, right? Like, is changing the scenery really going to be enough to escape this darkness that seems to follow them wherever they go? Because even in the final moments of this episode, evil reminds us that evil is insidious, it's persistent,
Yes.
it's always lurking right there beneath the surface, waiting for any opportunity to resurface. And I'm going with this.
Yes.
That final chilling shot of baby Timothy transforming into a demon.
I still can't believe it.
Right.
Talk about a cliffhanger.
Talk about a cliffhanger. You finally think, okay, I can breathe. We're good. And I was like, nope, pull the rug right out from under you.
Classic evil, though. Classic evil.
Well, it's like, what does this transformation mean?
Right.
Did the baptism not work?
Mm-hmm.
Is Timothy truly destined for evil? Is there still hope? It's like this final twist that lingers long after the credits roll.
It really does.
And it perfectly encapsulates, I think, what makes Evil such a compelling show. I mean, that ending with Timothy.
Oh, yeah.
It really makes you think about how the line between good and evil can be so blurry, even within a family, even within a child.
It's true.
It's unsettling. It really is. It forces you to confront that possibility that evil doesn't always announce itself with, like,
Right.
a grand gesture.
It's not always so obvious.
Or some, demonic voice booming from the heavens.
Right.
Sometimes it's subtle. Sometimes it's disguised as something familiar, something that you love, something you might even cherish.
And that, I think, is what evil does so well. It doesn't shy away from those uncomfortable truths, right? But it presents them in a way that's thought-provoking, but also entertaining. So you're left with this sort of lingering sense of unease, this awareness that even when things seem peaceful, evil might be lurking right there under the surface.
Yeah, and it reminds me of that saying, like, the price of freedom is eternal vigilance.
Oh, that's a good one.
You think you've won a victory, but you can never truly let your guard down.
Right.
Because there's always a chance, there's always that potential. for evil to reemerge, to adapt, to find new ways to exploit those weaknesses.
And that's such a powerful message, I think, to end on, especially in the world today. I mean, we live in a time where the lines between truth and deception, right and wrong, they feel so blurred sometimes.
All the time, it feels like.
And evil doesn't give us any easy answers, but it reminds us how important critical thinking is, how important it is to question the narratives that we're being presented with, to recognize those insidious ways that evil can really infiltrate our lives, oftentimes through the very things that we embrace.
Right. The technology we were talking about earlier.
Exactly, exactly.
So I guess as we kind of start to wrap up our deep dive here on this Evil series finale, what are some of the big takeaways that you hope, our listeners are walking away with?
Well, I think at its core, this show is a nuanced exploration of good and evil. And it's not this simplistic battle between angels and demons, but this really complex interplay between the choices that we make, the pressures of society, and that ever-present potential, I think, for darkness to kind of bubble up in even the most unexpected places. And you're right, that finale with its very open-ended nature, Timothy's transformation, it's a reminder that this fight against evil is ongoing. It's within ourselves and it's in the world all around us.
It's a call to action in a way.
It is.
It's that reminder to stay vigilant, hold on to those things that make us human. Empathy, compassion, never underestimate the power of connection, especially in the face of darkness.
Well said.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, maybe that is the most hopeful message of all. Even when we're faced with really unsettling truths, insidious forms of evil, that human capacity for good, for love, for connection can be a powerful, powerful force.
Absolutely. Well, folks, that about wraps up our deep dive on the Evil series finale. A lot to think about. And on that note, we will leave you with this. As you navigate the complexities of your own lives, remember those lessons that evil has taught us. Question everything, think critically, and never underestimate the power of human connection. Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and most importantly, stay vigilant.